Okay, so first off, I want to know if you can hear me well. So nod if you're on camera, or raise your thumb. You can't hear me well? No, that's not good. Let me unmute you, and you can tell me what the problem is. Yeah, you can unmute. Can you hear me at all? You can turn on your cameras and show me your faces. No? Sylvia, you can't hear me at all? You can hear me a little bit? You can hear me now? I can't hear you, but you can unmute yourself. Yeah, you're okay? Okay.
Keep talking and we'll see how it goes. Your voice was shaky before.
It's shaky? Well, let's hope for the best. You can hear. Golan says we can hear me well. Okay. Okay, so I'm going to mute you now. And okay. So, yeah, a lot of technical problems, but this is what this holiday is all about. And I just need to get my shoe already in front of my eyes. I'm sorry, this is... Whoa. Okay. You see, the thing is my strong computer in my study. And because it's the sukkah, I put a laptop that's not as powerful. But we're going to do our best. Okay, so I'm going to start. So, good evening, everyone. And Moadim Lesimcha, Chag Sameach. It's Sukkot now. Beautiful, amazing holiday in which we all come out of our comfy homes and houses, and we move into a ramshackle, unsturdy, temporary dwelling place, which is the sukkah, in order to remind ourselves of what our forefathers felt like when they were traveling through the desert in times of uncertainty, and the separation between us and the outside world is very, very weak. We can hear all the cars. I hope we'll manage to speak above this. And one of the most interesting things about Sukkot, and this is the element we want to focus on today. There are all kinds of things we can focus on, but we want to focus on today on the topic of the scroll of Koheley. The scroll of Koheley, also known as Ecclesiastes, which is a Greek word, which comes from the word congregation or crowd, which is the Hebrew meaning of Koheley as well, a kahal, because Koheley is one of the names of King Solomon. King Solomon, great king, but he was also called Koheley because he would gather crowds around him. We are now living in a time, in the coronavirus time, in which we can't congregate. In Hebrew, it's called lehitkahel. We can't create a kahal. It's actually the very same word that is used for Koheley. It's the same word that we use now here in Israel when we're talking about that it's forbidden, absolutely forbidden, to create a crowd that's more than a few individuals, few meters apart. It's the same word. So Koheley is all about coming together as a crowd. We can't do this now on a physical level, but we can do it virtually. We're 16 people now, which is probably more than my sukkah can contain, which is really amazing. It means that although we can't congregate together in one place, we can congregate, we can create a kahal that's even bigger because it's virtual, it's online, we're in different continents, and we're coming together. It's very amazing. So we want to understand a little bit, touch a little bit on the topic of why the part from the Bible, the part from the Tanakh that we read on Sukkot is the scroll of Koheley, the scroll of Ecclesiastes. There are 5 scrolls. On each of the festivals, we read a scroll. So on Passover, it's the scroll of the Song of Songs. And in Shavuot, the Festival of Weeks, it's the scroll of Ruth. And in the 9th day of Av, which is the negative day, it's the scroll of Eicha, which tells the story about the destruction. And on Sukkot, we read the scroll of Koheley. So we want to understand a little bit about the connection between this. What is this scroll all about? What is its place in the Tanakh generally? It's a very deep and dense and sophisticated scroll. We're not going to open all its layers, but we want to touch a little bit upon its very meaning, what it's really all about. We want to sort of go over it very generally and understand what's going on there. What is it doing in the Bible? It's not obvious that it was contained in the Bible. When the Bible was edited, some of the books within it, there have 24 books, some of the books, it wasn't obvious that they're going to be there. It's not just in our eyes, it's not obvious. It was never obvious. They were debating if it's going to come in. The Song of Songs is one of them, and Ecclesiastes Kohelet was another. And for good reason. It's very strange to find such a scroll in the Bible. And also we're going to understand what it has to do with Sukkot. So we'll start with this. We'll start with that. There are 3 books within the Tanakh that are ascribed to King Solomon. And the 3 books are the Song of Songs that we mentioned, and Proverbs, Mishlei, a book of many, many proverbs and aphorisms and idioms and ideas. That there wasn't a debate about Proverbs. It's a very wholesome book. There was a debate about the Song of Songs, and there was a debate about Ecclesiastes. And these are the 3 books that King Solomon wrote that are included in the Bible. He wrote many more books, but only these 3 were included in the Tanakh. So it's a big question. What was the order that he wrote them? Which did he write first, and which second, and which third? So the most common opinion is that when he was young, he wrote poetry. He wrote the Song of Songs, and it's a love song. When you were young, you were in love, and it's what it's all you think about. And he wrote a very romantic, very beautiful Song of Songs, the Song of, or Solomon's Song as it's also called. And that was in his youth. And then as he matured and he became wiser, he started writing the book of Proverbs. Mishlei, that also has to do with his name. Shlomo and Mishlei, it's made up of the same root letters. And all of his essence, his being was really all about coming up with metaphors and fables and ideas that help us understand the deep concepts of the Torah and why we need the wisdom of the Torah. And it's a book of wisdom. So that's the book of Proverbs. He wrote that when he matured. And then, so goes this interpretation, he wrote Kohelet when he was old and bitter. So it's the opposite extreme of the Song of Songs. And it also makes sense why these 2 writings were problematic. The youthful writing of the Song of Songs, because it appears to be very erotic. And that would be a problematic in a book that in the Tanakh, in the book of Jewish law, which has a lot to do with being modest and so on. And also what he wrote when he was old. When he was old, there's something about the book of Ecclesiastes of Kohelet that seems to be very, very pessimistic. So he was an old man. That's what it's. That's the basic explanation. Now, the other big conundrum that we have, other than what is it doing in the Tanakh generally, is what is it doing in the festival of tabernacles, in the festival of Sukkot? Why? Because the festival of Sukkot is supposed to be the most joyous of all holidays. This is the holiday of which the Torah says, "V'samachta b'chagecha v'ayita ach sameach." You should be merry in your festivals, and you should be only merry. The only thing you should be is extremely happy and joyful, and just a week of celebrating. And the joy of Sukkot is unsurpassed and unmatched in any other time of the year. That's what it was said. So how come on the festival, in the 1 week that's supposed to be the most joyous, most fun, we open a book that opens with, and I'm going to read from the Art Scroll translation. Of course, there are many translations, they're all very different. but it's good enough to get the vibe. It opens with utter futility, says Koheley, utter futility, all is futile. And then it goes on to say what real value is there for a man in all the gains he makes beneath the sun. And later on, he goes to talk also against merriment. So contradictory to the essence of Sukkot, or so it appears. I said to myself, come, I will treat you to merriment, taste mirth. That too I found was futile. Of course, the Hebrew word for futile is hevel. Hevel means the breath that comes out of your mouth. And the idea is that everything in life is transient and it dissipates, just like the breath that comes out of your mouth. And he says this about everything in the world. And it's extremely, when you just read it, it's extremely depressing. So in the most happy holiday of the year, we have the most depressing book of the Tanakh. And this is a good question to start a class with. And we'll just quote a few more pearls from the scroll. He says, and so I loathed life, for I was distressed by all that goes on under the sun, because everything is futile and pursuit of wind. And then he says, then I accounted those who died long since more fortunate than those who are still living, and happier than either those who passed away already and those who now live are those that have not yet come into being and have never witnessed the miseries that go on under the sun. These verses are all from the opening chapters. Later on, it becomes more complicated. And then he has some verses that speak of the merits of happiness and of the merit of being alive. It says it's better to be a dog who's alive than a lion who's dead. So there's a lot of inner contradictions. But the overall feeling, the overall emotion that this book evokes is of life being futile and life being pointless. And that's the general feel that we get of the book, excluding the last chapter and especially the last two verses, in which he suddenly switches direction and he finds meaning in life. But that's the 12th chapter. You have 11 chapters which are generally, broadly speaking, very pessimistic. And in the end, he finds some meaning, but it appears so small in comparison to the rest. So the question really still remains. Why not just write the final chapter? Why not just write the final line in which it says there is a purpose to life, which is to serve God? That's what he says in the final two verses, especially the verse before last, which we read last. We're going to look at those verses in a minute. So it's very confusing. We have this happy holiday. We enter the sukkah. There's a roof of vegetables over our head. We're holding vegetables. Everything is alive when you're holding vegetables. If the vegetables aren't alive and they're not green, you can't use them. And so it's true that we experience the transiency of everything, but it's in a very joyful way. And then we're stuck in the sukkah with this very bitter old man. I'm exaggerating, but that's the feeling when you're studying Koheley in the sukkah and you don't figure out what the secret here is. So that's what we want to understand. And even the street just became quiet for the dramatic impact of now we want to figure out what the secret is all about. So we're going to start with this, with making the following point. As I said, there is a bigger question in the background. The bigger question in the background is, what is this book doing in the Bible at all? And the reason this is a big question is that when you look at the Bible, historically, when you're comparing the Bible to other religions and mythologies and cultures that existed in the world pre-biblical times or in early biblical times, when we're talking about the Torah being given and then later on as it's being written, as the later aspects of it are being written. So the Torah, the 5 books, are given during the 40 years of the desert, but there's a lot of history, human history, that precedes this time. And then over the next few centuries, the books of the prophets are written and the writings are written. And throughout this time, the Bible is formed. When you look at this time and the time preceding this, and you look again very, very broadly, you can see the following idea. You can see that in many ways, the Bible is an answer to a very basic tenet that the world was holding on to pre-biblical times. And that tenet, or that idea, was that time is cyclical. That time is circular, that it's a wheel, the wheel of time. And the wheel of time repeats itself endlessly. This has been called by researchers or people who study religion and comparative religion, they called it the myth of eternal return. The myth of eternal return is the idea that's prevalent in almost all universal global mythologies. And this is the idea that time repeats itself endlessly. Whether this is a good experience or a bad experience depends on the culture. We'll see this in a minute. Generally speaking, primitive cultures venerate the circle of time. They venerate the circle of the seasons, which is the yearly circle, or the monthly circle, the circle of the moon, the cycle of the moon, or the cycle of human life from being born to dying. And it's really part of revering or venerating nature. In Hebrew, the word for nature, teva, is the root of the word tabat, which means ring. Ring, a circular ring. And nature come from the exact same root. Nature is cyclical. We have the cycles of, as I said, the moon and the sun and the seasons and the day. And everything is moving in circles. The planets are moving in circles. And primitive man saw this as the ultimate truth. And his life revolved around this idea of the circle. So he would dance in circles. And primitive music is also rhythmical. When in music you have rhythm and melody. Rhythm is something circular, it's repetitive. Melody belongs to a later stage in the development of culture, when it starts developing a story. A story develops, it's not repetitive, it's not circular, but melody comes after rhythm, and it's based on rhythm. But primitive music, tribal music, is all about rhythm and dancing in circles around the fire. And this is in many ways, the strongest, most basic motif of all primitive, basic mythologies in the world. They all spoke about the different changes in life as coming out and coming back in to this circle. The circle was the ultimate truth, and our purpose was to melt into this circle, to join the circle of life, the circular dance of life. And creating a line means breaking the circle. Creating a line was a bad thing, was considered a negative thing. History, linear time, linear development was something that was considered negative because it changes the eternal repetition of the circle of nature and the circle of the cosmos. And this is, and you can look this up if you opened and if you Google the idea of the myth of eternal return, you can read a lot about this. And it's so prevalent in so many cultures, you can't ignore it. And when you can think about it, it's very intuitive, because if you look at nature, that does appear to be the ultimate meaning of everything. The sun rises and the sun sets, and the moon waxes and the moon wanes, and the seasons, you have the tree shedding its leaves, and then it grows new leaves, and everything is cyclical. And they wanted to echo this and repeat this. And in many ways, primitive religion also envied animals, because animals take the circle very easily. They don't mourn their dead, and they live the cycles of nature without any inhibition. They don't contemplate suicide. They don't contemplate where is the circle coming from. And early man, primitive man, if you look at all the totems and all the earliest kinds of idols, the earliest idols weren't anthropomorphic. They looked like animals. And that was part of trying to to worship nature. When you worship nature, you want to be like an animal. Now, after this stage came another stage in which more sophisticated religions and more sophisticated philosophies and mystical systems, they took the opposite view. And they said that our purpose in life is to break free from the circle. The circle wasn't good, now it became bad. And instead of something to celebrate, to dance around the bonfire and to celebrate the stages of life, and also to celebrate death and to celebrate all the stages of this cycle, they said, no, all this cycle is a vicious circle. It's a cycle of misery. And the purpose of all life, of human life, of conscious life, is to, via meditation and via elevating your consciousness, to break free from the endless cycle. They also believed in reincarnation was the part of the same cycle. Their purpose is to break free from this cycle. This appears to be the very opposite. And you can say it is the very opposite because first the cycle was considered something very positive, and now it's considered our enemy. Now that's the thing we want to escape. But when you think about it, the escape wasn't in favor of linear time. It wasn't that they replaced circular time or cyclic time with linear time. They replaced cyclic time with timelessness. They wanted to break free from this world and to be in a timeless state of nirvana or nothingness, timelessness, that you break free, you transcend physical reality altogether, any kind of time. So in many ways, the primitive view that worshipped the circular time, and the later, that you find this in Buddhism and Hinduism, at least in the higher levels of those religions, among the monks and the sages, what they aspire to is to come out of time altogether. And what these two views have in common is that they're both ahistorical. They're against the idea of time, of living within the dimension of time and building forward and advancing and advancing the world, this world, into a better place. The idea of linear time and progression and growth and developing the world and really redeeming the world exists in neither of these two worldviews. It doesn't exist in the primitive worldview that worships the circle, because if you want to change something, it becomes wrong. You have to preserve the circle. And also doesn't exist in the religion that wants to leave this world and to transcend this world and come out of this and remove the shackles of this world, because it doesn't want to redeem this world. It doesn't care about this world anymore. And in many ways, when you look at the Bible is one huge reply to this kind of worldview. It starts in Genesis, but as opposed to most mythologies that also may have a kind of Genesis, they have reality coming out of some primordial void. But if you look at the way they end, you can see this in Norse mythology and in Greek mythology, reality ends up coming back into the void. It dissolves, it disintegrates because of this cyclical worldview. This is why Greek culture ultimately saw this world as one big tragedy. That's the source of the tragic worldview, and the reason that the highest form of art in Greece was the tragedy, because that's how they perceived nature. And their mythologies echoed this with the idea that everything goes back into the void. But the Tanakh starts with the world coming out of the void, or the tohu vavohu, the chaos of creation, the primordial void, and then it creates an arrow of time through the 6 days and the 7th day, and it ends in two ways. It ends, the books of the prophets end with the prophecy of the end of times, which is a total redemption, in which the world acknowledges its divine origin, and the creator of the world is acknowledged by all living beings, and there's peace, and there's no more famine and no more war. It's a rectified, redeemed earthly world. And it doesn't go back. It's very, very, very linear. And in many ways, this is the origin of writing history, not just in the sense of writing chronology. Before the Bible, a lot of peoples, a lot of kingdoms wrote chronologies. They wrote a chronicle, they chronicled events. This happened, and this happened, and this happened. But there's no progression. It's just one king and the other king, and one war and another war. But the Bible, when you look at the beginning and the end, and I was about to say there are two endings to the Bible. One ending is the prophetic ending. That's in the books of prophet, of the book of the prophets. And the other ending is the historical ending, which is the end of the Babylonian exile. The end of the Babylonian exile is the second time. It's a redemption. There was the redemption from Egypt. That's how we can talk now about three endings. The Torah ends with the redemption of the ending of the redemption of coming out of Egypt, when the people of Israel reached the land of Israel. And then the Tanakh altogether ends with the second return of the Jewish people to its land at the end of the Babylonian exile, as they're about to build the second temple. And also in between, you have the prophets that talk about the third ending. It's wedged there in the middle, very interestingly. And that talks about the end of all times, which is the ultimate redemption. It's really coming back from the exile of the second temple. So it's very, very interesting when you look at it from this perspective. The whole purpose of the Tanakh is to draw a line. In Hebrew, the word line, kav, is the root of the word hope. You can say that when the Tanakh draws this linear line and tells us that although the circles of time, of the seasons and the week and the month and all these, they exist and they're part of, and you have to do, you need holidays and you need to celebrate all the different stations in the cycle of life and in the cycle of the year and so on. But by putting them in the context of a linear vision of history, those circles become a spiral of progression. And the idea is that we're not going in circles, but we're also not running away from time. We're using the circle in order to try and progress and advance. And even if there are setbacks in a spiral, it depends on how you draw the spiral, all kinds of ways of drawing a spiral. But one of the ways is that you go back and forth, but you're still advancing. So there are sometimes it seems like you're receding. For example, if we, like I said, the Torah ends with us coming to the land of Israel, but then later on we're exiled. And then the books of Ezra and Nehemiah tell us about coming back. So even when we're exiled, it's really part of a progression. We never assume, oh, so now that the Babylonian exile happened, it means we're just going back to Egypt and everything reverts back to the previous bad times. No. We're saying now it's in favor of coming back and building a temple that's somehow more advanced and creating a Jewish life that's more advanced. Even when we're going back, we're really going forward. This is an optimistic, life-choosing philosophy that the Bible is sort of placing in front of us as a massive reply to the two versions of ahistorical religions. The circular one that worships the cycles of nature, and the timeless one, which is maybe also like a kind of circle, but it's a circle that's outside of this world. It's not the cycle of nature, it's the cycle of transcendent consciousness that is beyond time. And as I said, they're both ahistorical, or they don't have the element of linear time within them. So, going back to our question, just one final idea. Not only is the Tanakh such an argument for timeliness as opposed to timelessness, there's something very interesting when you look at the story of creation. We have 22 letters in the Hebrew alphabet. The story of creation is supposed to have all of those letters, because this is really about the world being created out of letters. The word is created out of speech, but amazingly, one letter is missing. You can't find it anywhere in the story of the creation. We're talking about the first story. It talks about the 7 days. And even in the second one, it takes some time until this letter appears. It's the letter Samech. Samech, of course, is the circular letter. The circular letter suggests circle, cyclical repetition. And it's nowhere to be found. It's the one letter you can't find in the story of creation. So it's an amazing idea. The story of creation so much wants to hammer in the idea that we're not talking here about circular time. We're creating a trajectory that starts at the beginning of time and ends at the end of times with an amazing redemption of physical reality. And one more thing before going back to Ecclesiastes. If you open the beginning of the Mishneh Torah, the Rambam's, Maimonides' most foundational work of Halakha, in the beginning, when you get to the chapter of Ilchot Avodah Zarah, that is the laws regarding idol worship and everything that's forbidden that goes around idol worship, he starts that book with a history of idol worship, how it came about, because in the beginning, Adam and Eve spoke with God. And he talks about this gradual deterioration and the forgetting of the connection with the Creator until all the world was only made up of idol worshippers. And then, and I'm quoting here, and then he finishes this historical description with an amazing phrase that really echoes everything we just said. He said, and on this path, the world continued its course of circuity. In Hebrew is haya mitgalgel. The word would roll and roll and roll, generation after generation, for almost 19 generations. Abraham was the 20th generation, and that's what he's getting to. So on this path, the world continued its course of circuity until the birth of the firmest pillar of the world, Abraham, our father. And of course, nothing is accidental here. He used the word mitgalgel. The word continued in its course of circuity. And then he uses the image of a pillar. He likens Abraham to a pillar because a pillar is linear. With Abraham, the recollection that the world is not a cycle. It's not an endless cycle with no meaning and no end point. The pillar points upwards outside of the circle at God the Creator and creates also a trajectory, a line that we can follow. So after all of this, we go back to Ecclesiastes. What is Ecclesiastes doing, Koheley? He ruins everything. Inside the Tanakh, which is all about coming out of the circle, we suddenly find a book that's all about the circle. And all he talks about is how everything goes in circles. That the wind goes and the wind comes back, and the sun goes and the sun comes back, and there's nothing new under the sun. And the epitome of this, the highest point, is of course the most famous, has been made into a famous song, the description of all the different stages of life that he said, a time to be born and a time to die, a time to plant and a time to uproot, and a time to kill and a time to heal, and all this until a time of war and a time of peace. There are exactly 28 times there, divided into 14 positive times, 14 negative times. It really creates a kind of huge lunar cycle. The lunar cycle is roughly speaking 28 days, 4 weeks, 2 weeks of waxing, 2 weeks of waning, 14 days, 14 days. And this is the most famous paragraph, one of the most famous paragraphs in the world, in world history of world literature. And this is in many ways the heart of Koheley. And Koheley is all about the world going in circles and how futile it appears. Sometimes Koheley sounds like one of those Oriental sages, like maybe a Buddhist or a Hindu. And in fact, many people have made this comparison, that he's giving up on this world. He says that this is a vicious circle. It's a circle of agony. Let's just escape this in some way. On the other times, he says, well, just accept it. Like in the circle of times. There's a time for this and a time for this, and everything has its place in the great cycle of time. And that's when it sounds like the more primitive religions that worship this circle of time. And only at the very end, as I said, he breaks the circle. And he breaks this in a very beautiful way. And in Hebrew, it says, it starts with Sof Davar Akol Nishma. So I read the translation. Translation, again, Art School translation. He says, the sum of the matter, when all is said and done, revere God and observe his commandments. For this applies to all mankind. So, Ki ze kol ha'adam. This is the purpose of human life, the purpose you were created for. Then there's another verse that God will call every creature to account for everything unknown, be it good or bad. This is really the final verse. You have to account for what you did. There is a judge after all these circles are ended. There's a judge, and you have to answer to this judge. But it's customary in Jewish tradition, you can find it in every Bible, that after this final verse, we go back to the verse before last. Sum of all the matter, when all is said and done, revere God and observe his commandments, for this is the purpose of mankind. Now, interestingly, this verse, that's last one before last, and then is again put in the end, starts with the letter Samech. The one letter that's missing in the story of creation is here. It starts this final or ultimate or penultimate verse, or penultimate turned ultimate. But the word is Sof, end. It's like he's breaking the circle. He's using the letter of the circle, Samech, but the word is Sof. He breaks the circle, breaks the spell, and he says we can come out of the circle. There is something beyond that gives life's meaning. It's not the solution of the primitive religion dancing around the fire, and it's not the solution of the ascetic Buddhist or Oriental monk who's trying to transcend reality. It's something that has to do with serving God and being accountable before God, morally speaking, in this world. But again, it's just the final two lines, or more broadly speaking, the final chapter. But again, the question is, what is this? If the entire Bible is one long answer, one long reply to the ahistorical religions of old and the ahistorical philosophy, and it's about creating a linear time, why put this book that echoes them so forcefully? Why echo them so much? If the Bible is going out of its way to replace them, why give them so much room? Why even open up the possibility for people to come and say, oh, Koheley is just like Buddhism or Hinduism. Koheley is just like one of those primitive myths of eternal return. It isn't. Look at the ending. But why even create the possibility of making this comparison? So I'm going to give a simple answer, and then we're going to make it a deeper answer. So the simple answer, something I heard long ago, which really captured me, and I think it's a very, very beautiful answer, and then it really touched me in a very personal way, is that it goes like this. One of the ways to think about the Bible is 24 books. We can think about the Bible as a medicine cabinet. And actually, this is said by the sages. They say that God is a healer. He heals all of your wounds. He says, if you have a headache, learn Torah. If you have a stomach ache, you should learn Torah. Whatever it is that you have, learn Torah. It's the ultimate medicine cabinet. It has everything to heal you. You have to learn it properly. It has everything. It was actually just, if you studied the Daf Yomi, it was just a couple of days ago that this was said, this idea. Now, there is something famous that is a principle among doctors ever since the beginning of time. No medicine cabinet is ever complete without a vial of poison. You need one vial of poison in the medicine cabinet. It's incomplete. And in fact, many medicines are as poisons to you if you're healthy. If you take the wrong medicine, it could hurt you or make you feel bad. And sometimes it could really kill you. And the idea is that an expert doctor knows when and how much and to what extent and in what situation one should use maybe a little bit of poison, and that could really heal you. And there are many examples of this. And we can say that all vaccination work this way. It's internalizing something negative, and then that builds your immune system. That's how you become immune to something. But of course, all this needs to be done extremely carefully. You need to be an expert doctor. Not everyone can just open the medicine cabinet and just take any bottle and just, fill up and drink it. And the idea is, of course, that the Bible is one big medicine cabinet, and every medicine cabinet is incomplete without a vial of poison, and the vial of poison within the medicine of the medicine cabinet called the Tanakh is Ecclesiastes, is Koheley. Koheley is that poison. The Baal Shem Tov said, he said this idea, that an expert doctor knows how to use poison. That's why you need some poison. And in Chassidut, it's customary to say that what is a poison? The poison is egoism. Egoism is poison. But a tzaddik knows how to use egoism in a way that's positive. He knows how to leverage egoism. But you can think about some other poisons also. So in many ways, Koheley is the poison within the medical cabinet. And if you just open the medical cabinet and you take that bottle and you just drink it as is without prescription, without knowing when and what's the perfect time and in what context and in what atmosphere you should learn the book of Ecclesiastes, you can really get depressed and it could kill you. There are some verses there that are so depressing. If you just read them and you think this is Judaism, it really, you don't know what's the purpose of life anymore. That's because you took it without prescription. That's not how you're supposed to read Ecclesiastes. You have to know how to read it. It's there, but don't you know that the Tanakh is a medical cabinet? Don't you know you don't start open it up and read it? This even goes regarding the other books. You can't just open Genesis and understand what's going on. You need to have interpretations. You need to have a rabbi. You need to open this up seriously. Some things don't make sense. They contradict. And this goes especially true about Ecclesiastes. Now I'm going to tell you a personal story. And about a situation in my personal life that Koheley was the cure for me. So I was a teenager. When I was a teenager, I grew up totally secular. You can't get more secular than the home that I grew up in, seriously. It was, my father called our home ultra-Orthodox secular. That was our denomination. And ultra-Orthodox secular. No mezuzah, no bar mitzvah, and a lot of cynicism regarding anything religious and anything Jewish in many ways. And my father did love the Tanakh very much as a work of literature. He was himself a poet and writer, and he liked the Hebrew language very much, and so he loved the Tanakh, and he knew bits by heart, but very much disconnected from faith or religion. And of course, don't bring the rabbis into the picture at all, just read the Tanakh. And then one day when I was a teenager, I didn't like the Tanakh also, so I was worse. My father at least liked the Bible. I didn't like the Bible. It was the one subject even in secular schools, you have a lot of hours or classes are dedicated to Tanakh, but I hated Tanakh. I didn't want anything to do with Judaism at all. Then one day I was bored. And when I was bored, I picked up the Tanakh and I just went over it. And then I realized there are some books that I have no idea what they're about. For example, Koheley. I looked at Koheley. I have no idea what is this about. Nobody's ever talked about this. So I opened it up and I read it. And it was just amazing. It really captivated me. And I felt it echoed my secular, existential, absurdist philosophy. And it echoed it so much. And for me, it was amazing that this book of religion finds a place that it gives me room. It gives my worldview, my atheist worldview. Of course, I didn't like the last two verses, but until the last two verses, I really liked it. In fact, I was so moved by this, I remember rushing to my father and telling him, I found something in the Tanakh that I really enjoyed. I really enjoyed it. It's so beautiful. And he smiled. He said, of course, good morning, join the club. It's a beautiful book. And for me, this was like a tiny moment, long before I dreamed that I would be so immersed in studying Judaism, that the Tanakh touched me. And so this is, I think, an example, and of course, it's not just me. Many people have this experience that there's something comforting, ironically, there's something very comforting about Kohelet being there and echoing the apparent meaninglessness or futility of life. And there's something about talking about faith, redemption, providence, there being a judge, there being someone who governs reality, having all these ideas without giving some room to the fact that down here, it doesn't appear this way most of the time. And a great deal of the time, it appears that we're very much alone, things don't make sense. And there's something amazingly comforting. You know, if you come to someone and you tell him, if you come with this higher truth about there being a God and a higher truth and everything is progressing and everything is advancing, but you don't address the experience of being down here in the dark and down here going in circles and not understanding why we're going in circles and having this endless cycle of exile and problems and illnesses and wars and being tired and not understanding things, it doesn't ring true. This whole talk about redemption and providence, it doesn't ring true, but it does ring true if you give some room. So this is the poison. It's a poison, but if when you take it with prescription, a little bit in Sukkot, when you're in the Sukkah, in the most joyous holiday, when you're able to experience the fact that everything is transient, but in a good way, that you can connect to something higher, and really everything, breaks apart in the end, your houses and everything, but there's something beyond it. There's this divine light surrounding you, and it's a very happy holiday, and you're with your family, and you're smiling, and you're singing, and in this time you read Kohelet, it creates an amazing combination. So that's the first level of the answer. We started late, and we have to finish in a few minutes, but we have to get to the deeper answer. The deeper answer is that we said that we spoke about two worldviews in the beginning of human history. One, the primitive religion that has to do with worshiping circular time, and the other, the wants to transcend time and sort of connect to a higher circle of timelessness. And then we said that the Tanakh is all about creating a line of hope, or you could say a rope of hope, because line is also a rope. And so you have a rope of hope that sort of takes you up, but really what it's supposed to do, it's supposed to connect it to circles. And what do I mean connected to circles? The idea is that according to Kabbalah, we have the circle of nature, Taba'at HaTeva, right? Nature, same root as Taba'at, ring. We also have something called the surrounding lights, the divine surrounding lights. God revealed himself in a revealed light. This is called the light that fills up the world. It comes into the world. This is the Torah itself. Torah, prophecies, everything we understand. This is like the line, the rope of hope that is sort of like a line that rescues us, like a rope that takes us out of this circular pit that we're in this world. But there's another circle, which is the circle of surrounding lights. It's not the linear light, and it's not the dark circle of this world. It's a circle of light beyond this world, which is really the faith that God is equally everywhere. He's both in the good and in the bad. He's both in the light and in the dark. He's both when you're up and when you're down. He's there always and at all times. He's omnipresent, and everything he does is part of this. Everything that happens to you is supposed to help you connect to this higher level of godliness, which is the level of the surrounding light. It's called the light that surrounds all the world. Sovev kol almin. Again, it starts with samech, the circular letter. Sovev kol almin. So the idea is that the sukkah is a physical manifestation of this light. It surrounds us on all sides, right? We're above it and we're below it, and it's all four sides of us. And it's a manifestation of this surrounding light. And the reason that Kohelet stresses the circle so much and makes it present so much. No, he doesn't just jump over to the last two verses, but he talks so long about the circle, is that when you read it in a deep way, it's supposed to sort of pull down into your small circle of life, into your tiny circle of who you are and where you are, to pull in, gather in those lights. Just as when we're sending the sukkah and we're taking the lulav, we're pulling in the lights from all six directions. We want to pull in the consciousness, the surrounding light consciousness that we know in the background is there, that God is everywhere, that everything is for the best. We want to make it present. And this is also a kind of circle. It's the mystical circle that the mystics want to run away to. We want to take this mystical circle and pull it down into this world. It's really to take the high mystical circle of timelessness and to put it into the cycle of nature and the cycle of the seasons and the cycle of the day and the cycle of life, and to experience them together. So it really takes the line of the Tanakh, this line of hope or rope of hope, and brings it to its goal, to its purpose. Its purpose is not just to replace the circle, it's to connect those two circles so that they all work together. The circular time, the linear time, and the mystical circle beyond time all work together. They come together in our linear life. We want to live and work and advance and serve God in this world. And within the circle of the day and night and month and week and month and year and everything, we want to constantly experience the circular light that surrounds all the worlds. So this is really what Koheley is all about. And ultimately what the final chapter is all about, and some chapters beyond it, because it's all interwoven there. But if you read it carefully, you see that really what it wants to do is to make you appreciate each and every moment. It wants to make you appreciate each and every, this is the idea of the sukkah that's so transient. Now it's here and tomorrow it'll be gone, but you can capture the moment. It's the Jewish carpe diem, capture the day, capture the moment, but not just as a feeling, as an experience, as maybe the original carpe diem was all about. It sees the opportunity to experience the divine light that's beyond this world, that's omnipresent in this moment, in this place and time in one moment. You can experience it here and now. You can pull down the light into your particular moment in life. So ultimately, it's an extremely optimistic book. What appeared to be the most pessimistic book is really the most optimistic book. And not only that, but it's not only is it not the opposite of what the entire Bible is all about. That's how we started. The Bible is all linear and Kohelet is all circular. It's the exact opposite. It tells us what the purpose of the line is. The purpose of the line is not that we be on this line and that we let go of the circle. The point is that we connect the higher circle of the divine light that surrounds all the worlds, the higher samech, the higher circle of light, and pull it into this world and experience it in this world at each and every fleeting moment. This is what Kohelet is all about, and if you read it, you can find bits of wisdom that tell you how to do this. And the rest we can maybe explore in some other class, because we really have to end now. So I'm very happy you joined us, and in such a short notice. And I wish you all a very happy Sukkot, a few more days to enjoy this, to bask in this amazing, beautiful, divine light. Just, drink it all up and fill ourselves with this light, and it can give us the strength and the simcha, the joy, the happiness to give us fuel for the entire year. So I really bless you all with a wonderful Chag Sukkot and a wonderful year. And we'll see each other next week.